If you're haunted and harassed by your own inner critic, if you've ever been curious about why hypnosis works so well, if you're a seasoned hypnotist, or if you suspect that the inner critic is actually hypnotizing you to hold back from reaching the greatness that you know deep down is inside you, lean in and get inspired to get out of your comfort zone and create your one precious life with purpose and intention. If you like this show, you'll love my powerful hypnosis audio, The Answer Room, because it gives you crystal clear guidance and direction and illuminates an ingenious way to make triumphant decisions, no matter how stuck you feel or how confused you were. This powerful hypnosis audio is my gift to you when you go to theimpostermonster.com. Again, that's theimpostermonster.com. Don't forget theimpostermonster.com. And yes, I'm done saying it. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening. I'm Lori Hammond, and I'm truly grateful for you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. You are absolutely going to love today's conversation with Derry Cooke. I first discovered Derry through Freddie Jacquin when he did, I think it was Freddie's very first Fred Talk, and he delivered so much value and made me feel so excited about helping people in a more profound way. And since that time, Derry and I have talked a little bit. I've seen some of the amazing videos that he is making on Facebook right now, and I asked him if he would be a guest. Thank you so much for being here today, Derry.
Oh, you're very welcome, Laurie. It's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Will you tell myself and the audience a little bit about what you do, what brought you here, and anything else you want us to know about your work?
What I do, well, I'm a hypnotherapist. I struggle sometimes with that label. I switch around between calling myself a hypnotist, a hypnotherapist, a change agent. I'd say probably I'll call myself a hypnotherapist. What I do is essentially I help people get from where they are to where they want to be. And usually that is about helping people move from a place where they feel that they're stuck. And I have some perspectives about what it is that's sticking them there and how I can help them move from that place to a place where there's more possibility. So that's kind of what I do. When I talk about people, I work with the youngest I've successfully worked with is a 5-year-old. Currently, my oldest client is aged 85. I have worked with somebody 87. I haven't quite hit the 90s yet, but that'll happen. Men, women, all kinds of presenting issues. I think it's very tempting sometimes to fall into the trap of getting hung up on the labels that people present with when they come. And in fact, most of my clients, and could I be so bold as to suggest most of the clients that any of us see, they're all coming with essentially the same issue. And the issue might express in different ways, but the issue is essentially there is an automatic part of me which is keeping me stuck in this place that's not helping. And I have some goals which the automatic part of me isn't supporting. And that's what all of my clients have in common. They're wanting to move toward their goals from their place. So yeah, that's not even a nutshell. In a bag of nutshells, that's kind of what I do.
I love it. How long have you been doing hypnosis? I usually don't ask people that question because I'm not sure. I think that people can get great at this really quickly, but I'm curious for my own gratification.
Okay, there's two ways to answer that question. I started in hypnosis with a self-hypnosis book that I stole from my dad when he was Still with us. He was having trouble with sleepwalking. Somebody recommended he try self-hypnosis. He brought this book home. I stole it and fell in love with self-hypnosis. I was experimenting with pendulums and things. This was at the age of, I'm guessing, maybe 9 or 10 years old. I was staggered to discover that there seemed to be an intelligence inside me that was separate from who I thought I was, and that I could engage this intelligence in meaningful conversation. So I've been playing with hypnosis for, what is it, half a century. Now, how long have I been hypnotizing other people? Believe it or not, the very first time that I ever hypnotized anybody was in 2015. When I did my very first training, and that was 6-day residential training. I soon discovered that I seemed to be pretty good at it, and I certainly fell in love with it, and so decided that I definitely wanted to take my career in this direction. Prior to that, I had been a registered nurse, specializing in emergency nursing, but I also done a number of years in stroke rehabilitation, a lot of time with care of the elderly. So I've got a lot of the skills that I currently use in my practice. I've honed over a number of years inside of nursing, which can be very, very much about that deep engagement with people and helping them with their issues, which aren't always physical issues. They can very much be emotionally based issues as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Can you take yourself back to that first time in 2015 when you hypnotized the first person and maybe unpack what was going on in your mind? Were you nervous? Were you excited? What was that like?
The training that I did broke things down into absolute basics and very rightly focused on language. And so the very first practice run inside of the class, we were given a bunch of words and told these are ways of connecting things together. And they were things like words like every time and whenever and which means and then we were told to just take a hypnotic theme like comfort and just talk to the person and use, generate a stream of language like that. So I got my partner, I got him to close his eyes and said, and as you close your eyes, you can notice that you're starting to feel good, which means that, and just started adding in concepts like that. And I found that it flowed very easily. From there, it was simply a matter of adding in different skill sets to get that hypnotic voice, I guess. And I don't mean tone of voice. I am not the guy who goes, you are now falling into a deep sleep. That's totally not me. My voice can get a little croaky at times, and I do need to stay hydrated. But no, it's simply just about finding that part within yourself that's able to be the hypnotist, to take the responsibility for guiding the process. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I love that answer. And even when you first said, and as you close your eyes, it's like I could almost feel myself going into that place, because you do have a very hypnotic, the way you speak. I think you have such a genuine tone of voice, and it comes across in everything you say.
Thank you.
So if I ask you any questions during this podcast that you want me to edit out later, just let me know. But I'm really curious where you did your first hypnosis training.
I flew to Sydney and I trained with my first teacher was Steve Rame, who was teaching the process as outlined or prescribed, however you call it. The curriculum was Igor Ledochowski's professional, I'm going to get this wrong, professional conversational hypnotherapy program. I think that's it, 2.0.
Yes.
Yeah, and I started out being very, Igor would probably say that he was a neo-Ericksonian, certainly a big fan of the indirect approach. And I started out being an absolute true believer in that, and that was better than everything else. I have broadened my palette since then, and I would say that at times I use indirect language, at times I use direct language. But yeah, that was it there. It was the Igor Ledochowski approach. We learned a bunch of techniques in there, and some of them have stood me in very good stead, still use them to this day.
I love that. Yeah, Steve is spectacular. I know him well, and he does amazing work.
Incredible voice too. Talk about a hypnotic voice. Steve Rame is like...
Yes, it's like that boom.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Okay. It makes sense then. So one thing that you said is that you started off with a neo-Ericksonian approach and you've broadened since then. And I really want people who are listening to catch on to that and realize that even though Derry didn't have all the tools that he has now when he started, he was still able to get started with what he had and start making a difference. And I would imagine, Derry, that you're always learning and always adding to that toolbox. Are you not?
Absolutely. I think, though, the whole idea of a toolbox is, well, let's take the metaphor of a toolbox. If you keep adding to your toolbox, eventually you'll get so many tools in there, it makes it harder and harder to find the right one. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes so much sense.
And my favorite process to use, it's no secret, is Freddie Jacquin's arrow technique. That's the bedrock. I can go into a little bit of detail if you like about why I favor that, but I found that I discovered very early on, kind of by accident, that just that one technique, which is supposedly a technique for helping people with chronic pain, and it is fantastic for that, I found that it applies to any kind of change work. And so it's less important to have this massive repertoire of tools than it is to understand how to actually use a good tool and then use it effectively, and how to apply it to a variety of presenting clients, a variety of presenting issues that they want to work with.
I agree 100%. I think they're just about any tool. If you use it and love it, and especially if you've experienced it and it really resonates for you, you can use it for most any presenting situation. Will you speak a little bit more in depth about how you use it and maybe give a couple examples of unique situations where you've used it?
Why don't I tell you a little story about how I learned the arrow technique. I had heard about this for a while. I'd heard tell of this mysterious technique that could make people's pain disappear. And, you know, as a nurse who previously the only way I knew to make someone's pain disappear was to stick an IV into their arm and then give them a shot of morphine. And I could tell you a nice little story about that later. But yeah, I heard about this technique, and I was amazed to see the very first teaser posts on Facebook that, you know, coming soon, the arrow technique. I thought, oh, I've got to learn this. I managed to go onto their website while they were testing the mobile phone version of it, managed to pay for it and download it before they had actually released it. And for some reason, I wasn't able to get the videos, and the for some reason was it hadn't actually been released. But I got the text, and I read through all the text. I thought, okay, I can see where this is going. needless to say, when the videos were released, I pored over them and I was like, okay, this looks really, really good. I need to practice this. Now, I had a event coming up where I booked a stall at I think it was called the Body, Mind, Spirit Expo. And it was just, I had a little stall there and people wandering around checking out things like crystals and tarot cards and clairvoyance. And, every now and again, people would wander past my stall and I would grab them and say, ever been hypnotized? No, no. Would you like to be? I wasn't charging anything for what I was doing. All I wanted to do was practice on unsuspecting members of the public. So I would just ask them, do you have a particular issue that you'd like to work through? And they'd say, yep. And I'd say, okay. And I would run the arrow with them. And I found that this thing, which was supposedly just for pain relief, I mean, out of everyone that I saw on those 2 days, I maybe saw 40 or 50 people. I think maybe only 4 of them were for pain relief. Had spectacular results with them, but I also had somebody quit smoking. I had somebody, anything that you might imagine seeing in the course of a hypnosis practice. I had people with those issues and they were all getting results. And so that got me thinking, well, what's actually going on here? I've been inquiring into the whole, I want to peek behind the curtains. I want to know what's actually going on when we do hypnosis. I don't know that I ever will know, but I've got some fairly good working ideas. So yeah, I found that the arrow was working for this wide variety of things. One of the more spectacular things that happened on that first weekend was a woman who took a long time to approach me and then asked whether I could possibly help her with her issue. And her issue involved having been literally kidnapped and literally gang raped over, her and a friend were kidnapped and gang raped over 3 days by a literal gang, like a drug dealing, hardcore gang of guys. And she was totally traumatized by that experience, as you'd expect. And I ran the arrow with her. 10 minutes later, the sense of trauma was gone. And she actually came to me the following year. She went into that same event only in the hope that she would see me there so that she could come up and tell me how her life had transformed from that one moment. And that blew my mind. It's just amazing that, anyone who would be looking at her would be thinking, okay, she's got PTSD, she's traumatized, she's going to need years of counseling. No, I'm not saying that every issue can be resolved in a single session. I used to think that, I don't anymore, but I am saying that I don't place any limits on what people can achieve in a single session. And yeah, I saw so many amazing results that weekend that it made me realize that it's important to look at the commonalities. It's important to look at what's actually going on inside of the change process rather than focusing on, oh, this person has that kind of issue, therefore they need this technique. And yeah, I don't think that's accurate.
Right. For people who are listening, who have these tools, but have been kind of scared to try them, can you talk to me about your attitude underneath the idea that you were just going to go set up and say, hey, do you want to try this out? It's almost, to me, I hear this almost let's see kind of attitude where you weren't making them huge promises. You were just saying, hey, let's see what happens. Is that accurate? And what else can you tell me about the mindset that let you have a willingness to go through and do that thing that might be so scary for people?
Coming back to the approach that I picked up in my very first training, the most valuable, and they did say this in the training, the most important thing that you will learn in this training is, now in Igor's realm, they call it H+. H+ means the idea that you are absolutely going to help somebody change because you value them so deeply. So yes, this is going to happen because I absolutely want you to make this change happen. Now, you could perhaps call that rapport. You could perhaps call that intent. Freddie has his own, Freddie Jacquin has his own process where he says whenever he's working with somebody, he has a little loop playing in his mind. Somewhere in his mind, he is running this bit of self-hypnosis. I'm a great therapist. You're a fantastic client. Words to that effect. I'm very good at doing this and you're an amazing client. And he just has that running. And at the same time, he has another loop playing, which is, I really care about you and I want you to be well. And that is the essence. That's the position that I come from. It's whenever I'm working with somebody, whatever kind of a shitty day I might be having or whatever, the moment that they are in my care, I love them. I just absolutely love them. I want them to be well. Their success is my top priority. Yeah. But there's another strand to the process that I think can be really, really helpful just to take on board as part of your mindset, which is that any results that you might witness your clients creating are their creation, they're not yours.
Yeah.
That takes the pressure off. It's like, whew, I don't have to have this amazing level of expertise. I don't have to be so clever. I don't have to remember the language patterns. I don't have to do any of that stuff because that's not where the magic is. I firmly believe that the magic is absolutely embodied in the client and their neurology. Now, the human brain is just the most beautiful, incredible, complex potentiality. That's the most complex structure that we know of in the universe. And there are so many capabilities in there that we are only just starting to scratch the surface of. That's where the magic happens. When my clients come to see me, I know, obviously they're human, therefore they have a human brain, therefore they have this capacity inside them. After all, they've managed to create this seemingly intractable problem that they are wanting assistance with. They're the ones who've built that. So they can unbuild it. They can create these amazing change processes. My role is simply to use my experience, my skill set, and my confidence, because I am confident, not that, I'm some sort of amazing hypno guru. I'm confident only because I have seen people just like them make those kind of changes. They haven't seen people just like them make those kind of changes. So that's what I can give them. I can give them that confidence, like, yeah, this thing which you're absolutely suffering with, yeah, you're the third one I've seen like that this week. The other two people, they're doing great. I expect you're going to do great as well.
I love that you just answered a question that was in the back of my mind, which is when someone comes in and they have their doubts, I think sometimes I felt like this when I started looking for a hypnotist. I felt like I was so broken and my problem was so much bigger than everyone else's. And I was the special flower that the rule didn't apply to, that it wasn't going to work for me. And so I was going to ask what you would say to someone like that, but I feel like that simple couple sentences is just perfect.
Yeah, one of my favorite original sayings, I don't have many, I love other people's quotes, but this is one of mine that I really love. And it's the results that you'll get don't care whether you believe in the process or not. The results that you get don't care whether you have confidence in the process or not. We can do this. Yes. And the expectation, or the price of admission, if you like, is very low. All I ever need from my clients is two things. I need them to pay attention, because without that, nothing. Other than that, all I need is for them to have decided at some level that they're going to do the best that they can. That's it. If they can do those two things, then the outcome is more or less preordained. Now, I'm not saying I get 100% success with everybody. Not far from that, though. When people come to it with that approach, it's amazing how powerfully people can change.
I love this. This feels like a little bit of a jump, but what would you say to a client who maybe comes in and says, well, I'm not good at visualizing? How do you get them past that limiting belief?
I say fantastic. A lot of my clients are hopeless at visualizing. I myself am hopeless at visualizing. I'm much more of an auditory guy. You can mention a piece of music to me, and if I've heard it, it will start playing in my head. And sometimes I have to kind of drown it out or switch it off somehow. Sometimes I can't find the off switch, and I just have to kind of move the speakers far away so they don't get too intrusive. I'm not a great visualizer at all, and they don't have to be. But I have that game. I think I did that on I think it was the Fred talk. I talked about this thing that I just call it the imagination game. And it's just where I hold my hand out and I like to make things up on the fly. And I just say, can you see there's nothing in my hand? That's right. Could you imagine that sitting in my hand is a perfect rose? Only this rose is not the typical red rose. This rose has got petals of all different colors. Every different color on the rainbow has its own petal and all those different shades. And yet dancing in the middle of the rose is a gorgeous little tiny pink hedgehog. And it's wearing a bowler hat. I'm just making that stuff up. My hand is still empty, and yet just taking somebody through that experience, people can imagine it and they can discover that they don't have to see this photorealistic thing. Yes. They can just do that because there is a part of their brain that knows what a rose is. There is another part of the brain that knows what the different colors are, knows what a rainbow is. There's another part that knows what pink is, what a hedgehog is, hopefully perhaps what a bowler hat is. And then they can just lock all those things together because that's what our brains do. Our brains are all the time making connections between things so that we can make sense out of the chaos of energy, which is just pouring into our systems through our nerve endings.
Beautiful.
So yeah, I might do that with them.
I really like that. That's actually one of the things I think of almost every time I see you. I remember that Fred talk. And I think you had a little guy in a tractor. I can't remember all of it, but every time I see you, I still think of that. And I don't consider myself a good visualizer, but you did such a great job. I can really see Steve Rame and Igor Ledahovsky's influence in that, because I used to start my sessions by having them close their eyes and describe a room in their house as if they were there. Yeah. And you find that everyone can do that. They know where the dresser is. They know what's sitting on the dresser. If they open the drawer, they know what's inside. And so that shows that we have these mental constructs that are somehow accessing a visual modality, even if we don't realize we're doing it.
Yeah, for people who drive, you can just say, imagine you're sitting in your car right now. Just reach out and put your hands on where the steering wheel is on your car. And people do that. I say, now, can you actually see the steering wheel? No. And yet you know that it's there. You've got a sense of exactly where it is. Visualization is a wonderful thing. I have clients, honestly, you say, imagine you're at the beach, and they will tell you not only which beach, they'll tell you what the tide is doing, how many other people are on the beach, whether any of them are sunburned. It's crazy. I'm not that guy. And most of my clients don't have that level of visual, internal, whatever you might call it, reconstruction. But it's not necessary.
I love this. I feel like you're dispelling a lot of limiting beliefs right now. Okay, I've actually been furiously typing notes as you've been speaking, and I have several questions that I want to ask. But before I do, is there anything that you were really feeling excited about sharing that you'd like to talk about before I take us down some random rabbit hole?
Well, funny you should say that. Yesterday I was reflecting on what we were going to be talking about, and this quote came to me from, it was from a previous teacher. I used to do body work a long time ago. I was trained in a discipline called Hello Work, and I trained with the creator of that, Joseph Heller. And one day people were talking about not having enough confidence, whatever. And he said this wonderful thing: self-criticism is self-indulgence. And man, that was like a sledgehammer. That one just hit me. He said, every moment that you are criticizing yourself, where is your client in that? Mm. And he said, you can't afford the luxury of self-indulgence. You can't afford the luxury of self-criticism. You need to be there for your clients. So I guess I just get that from this idea of just letting myself focus completely on my clients and focus on what they want, focus on the outcome that they're after. When I allow myself to do that, the self-criticism is completely, it's not even in the conversation. That mental chatter seems to disappear. And I guess this is somewhat similar to the idea of, if people are depressed, one of the very best things that people can do if they're depressed is to do some sort of selfless act of service for other people. As we focus on helping others, our own issues can seem a lot less relevant.
That's so beautiful. And you even said earlier, I typed this down. Where did I put it? You talked about seeing them the way they want to be, seeing them well. And you were talking about Freddie Jacquin's little mantra that he speaks when he's with the client. And I thought at that time, when we're really focusing on imagining the client at that desired state, at the outcome, their desired outcome, all of a sudden, all of those scary thoughts of what if I say the wrong words just fall away.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And people aren't fragile. You can say, you can flub your lines. You can say something, you start to say one word and halfway through your brain starts to say another word and you can end up saying gibberish. It doesn't matter. People are not fragile. We have resilience built into us. We have the capacity to correct for errors. So we don't need to be that all or nothing, oh my God, I wasn't 100% perfect, therefore I must be 100% rubbish. We can know that we're good enough.
Yes.
But how we know that we're good enough isn't our own self-assessment. We need to absolutely check in with our clients. We need to test the work that we're doing. And that's for our own growth and learning as practitioners, but it's also really, really valuable for the clients. The great thing about working with people with pain is that they know damn well that they're in pain and they know damn well when they're out of it. So it's very easy for, to ask those people on a scale from 0 to 10, how much pain do you have? 10 being the worst, and they can come up with a number. After any hypnosis session, I always ask people on a scale from 0 to 10, where is that issue now? And that is a way of just absolutely clarifying for them that they somehow have managed to resolve that issue for themselves. And then that reinforces the whole process. And that means that at that moment, they are suggesting to themselves how powerful they are. And I will always, my 3 favorite words to say at the end of a session aren't you amazing? Or
Oh,
aren't you clever? It's all about the clients are making these changes.
what did you say after aren't you amazing?
Aren't you clever?
Aren't you clever? That's beautiful. Derry, talk to me a little bit more about testing. Is that as simple as just saying, starting with that subjective units of distress on a scale of 1 to 10 at the start and then again at the end? Or are there other ways you test? And what would you say to a person who's afraid to test because they're afraid it hasn't worked?
If you're afraid of testing, get some hypnosis around that. And I totally relate. The very first time I came across this idea of testing, I was so reluctant. I was so scared to test because what if I ask them and they say no change? Well, that's amazing feedback. But yeah, it is scary and it is sobering to ask those people. And I can remember the very first time that I ever used the arrow technique when it didn't work. And I felt like I'd been knocked into a parallel universe. You know, I said to this person at the end of the session, on a scale from 0 to 10, where is that pain gone? And she said, still a 10. And this had never happened to me before. And this was probably about the, I don't know, maybe the 50th or 60th time that I had done it. And I was convinced that this technique was bulletproof and invincible and nothing could stand in its way. And this thing just absolutely didn't work. And there's an interesting sequel to that story, because I said to the woman, well, look, I'm really sorry for that. And I'm not suggesting other people do what I did, but my ethics don't let me, I don't feel that it's appropriate for me to charge people for my time. I feel it's appropriate for me to charge them for the results that we get. So if she didn't get a result, for me, that meant that the session was it was a learning session for me. She was my teacher in that moment, not my client. So I'm not going to ask her to pay when she's kind enough to teach me. So I didn't charge her for that, but I said, could you please stay in contact with me, because this is really interesting. Now, the issue that she had come for was some deep pain in both hip joints. When I say deep pain, she was no longer able to work. Her pain was about 8 out of 10 to 9 out of 10, depending on whether she was standing or sitting. And she had had investigations, she had CT scans, X-rays, MRI scans, nothing showed anything. So I was absolutely convinced that yes, hypnosis is going to sort this out. What happened after the session was eventually she went back to her doctor, who referred her back to the specialist, who sent her for more scans. And these new scans showed that the bones, the ball and socket joint of her hip joints, both of those bones had started to die. So the pain she was getting when she saw me hadn't produced any, it was caused by, it was what they call a bony angina. Now, when you have angina in your heart, it means that your heart muscle is okay, but it's not getting enough oxygen supply. If that deficit is severe enough, then the heart muscle actually dies, and then that's what's called a myocardial infarction or an actual heart attack. Now, this woman was kind of having bony angina attacks where there wasn't enough circulation in the blood vessels inside the bone. So the bone tissue was screaming out, and that was the pain that she was feeling. When that insufficiency progressed to a certain point, the bone started dying, at which point it suddenly started showing up in the scans. Now, her body wisdom was such that she needed to keep, this is my summation of it, she needed to keep that awareness of the pain, because that awareness was what took her back to the doctor to get the further investigations that ultimately led to her having a double hip joint replacement. And now she is once again back at work. She's once again able to exercise. She's lost all the weight that she'd put on due to the immobility. You know, that was the outcome that her body in its wisdom was taking her toward. And if the arrow had worked, and I don't think it could have, but if it had, we would have essentially cut off her ability to experience that feedback from her body as to what its needs were.
I can picture a person in that situation, and even myself at some points, getting out of that session and thinking, oh, I failed, you know, doing that test and realizing the pain wasn't gone, and perhaps experiencing some self-flagellation. And I know when I was a hairstylist and I would mess up a color, I would say, oh, I just need to stop doing hair and go find something else to do. And I find myself sometimes doing the same thing as a hypnotist. And so I love that you approached it with this let's see attitude, and that you were able to reframe what some people would consider a failure as an actual success. Again, going back to her body's wisdom, her unconscious mind knew what was best for her and gave her that experience, even though it wasn't what you were consciously looking for.
Yeah, and the reframe was more of a realization that I was looking at it the wrong way. It wasn't that I needed to somehow perform some neat little language pattern trick to pretend it was something other than what it was. It was that I was looking at it the wrong way. But just picking up on your previous comment about, when things go wrong, look, it's a very unusual week when I don't have moments of absolute despair thinking, what on earth am I doing? That wasn't the outcome that I was looking for. You know, I was hoping that, when I ran a particular process, I was wanting the phenomenal outcomes that I usually get. And, every week there's usually at least one where I just get a kind of result. And I'm better at snapping myself out of that funk now. I'm much better at going, I'm thinking those negative self-limiting thoughts. But I still have them, absolutely. And it's very easy just to fall into that self-critical, self-flagellation. I suck at this. I'm never going to be any good at this. All of those things that I thought I was good at. What if they're all wrong? What if? That's still absolutely a part of my makeup. It's still part of who I am. I'm just better at wrangling that particular part and kind of getting it out of the way so that I can get on with helping people make the best changes they can.
I appreciate you saying that. That's one of the reasons I love having so many amazing hypnotists on this podcast, because every single person who's been on this show underscores that I think one of the hardest things we do as change workers is moving past our own self-doubt. It's not learning all the techniques. It's finding the courage to use them in the face of that, what I call the imposter monster, saying, you suck.
You suck so bad.
Yes. I love this. Will you talk to me a little bit about you said you had a story about morphine injections.
Oh, yeah. I am now getting to the point where I'm thinking of letting go of my nursing registration because it requires me to do so many hours in the hospital setting each year, and I'm less inclined to do that these days. But there's been a big overlap where I've been still working in the emergency room, maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and as well as doing my hypnosis practice. I had a client come in, a patient I should say, because in hospital they're patients. I had a patient come in, and he was in severe pain. He had recently had it was a hip replacement, and he had the surgical dressing still on his right hip. And I honestly thought when I saw him, I thought, oh, this is a man with kidney stones, because the pain that people have with kidney stones is, I'm sorry, for those of you who have given birth, it's apparently worse than labour pain. I've been told that by women who have given birth and had kidney stones, that, yeah, childbirth, I used to think that was 10 out of 10. No, that's 9. Kidney stones was 10. This guy looked like he had passing kidney stones. He was in so much pain. Now, as it happened in the emergency department, there had been a couple of ambulances come in with some major trauma. So I knew that there was no way that I was going to be able to find a doctor free to prescribe the pain relief for this guy. And then once the pain relief is prescribed, the morphine, it has to be signed out by 2 different nurses, and they're all kept in a drug safe, and everything is locked away. So I told him, you know, all this pain that you're in, absolutely, we can stick in an IV, we can give you some morphine. And because of how the department is right now, is the soonest that we're going to be able to get you out of that pain is about 20 minutes. Or if you want to, I can help you with this pain right now, just using, we'll just see whether we can do this right now using hypnosis. And he was so desperate to get out of that pain that he was absolutely happy for me to do this. Now, I know that there is this wisdom that you should never actually do anything without a doctor's say so. But in this case, there was no way of getting to a doctor. And, you know, ethically, I stand behind what I did. And the outcome was phenomenal. His pain went from 10 out of 10 to 0, just running the arrow technique on him. And the only way that I can reconcile that in my head is that, how does morphine work? It works by loading up our pain receptors, our, what do you call it, the endorphin, the parts, the little the parts inside of our synapses that are available for morphine are the same parts that are available for endorphins. Our brains can produce these endorphins. I think running the arrow technique for somebody with pain, they just produce this amazing internal pain relief stuff. That's what he did.
That's brilliant. And his unconscious mind recognized that he was at the hospital. He's there to get help. That pain signal is no longer needed, and was able to just turn it off based on, I always tell my clients, it's, if you'll use your imagination, the unconscious mind speaks the language of imagination. And it's like you said earlier, as long as they're willing to pay attention and to do their best, they're going to get that result.
Yeah. I have trouble with the whole concept of the unconscious mind. I think, you know.
Yeah. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. I was thinking this morning, while I was doing the ironing, I was thinking about the unconscious mind and what is, you know, the approach that I was trained with was, there is this thing called an unconscious mind, and you can talk to it, and it can have a voice. And then somewhere else in the land of hypnosis theory, there's this idea of parts, and, you know, parts therapy, and you can access the different parts, and the different parts can have a voice. And it's like, hold on a second. Hold on a second. So is the unconscious mind then just a part? Is there even such a thing as the unconscious mind? I grappled with the whole idea of the unconscious, the subconscious, the superconscious, whatever. I was hearing so many different conflicting models from so many different people, who, each of whom I respected, but their models didn't match up. So it's like, well, what's actually going on? Now, the model that I have is based in the brain. Absolutely, our brains have you can consider what our brains do to have two different qualities. There is the part which is conscious, which is that we identify with. It's where our focus is, where our willpower sits. And then there's all the automatic stuff. Now, I talk to people, and instead of using the words unconscious mind, I sometimes talk to them about the automatic brain, or I'll talk about the automatic part of who you are. A really nice metaphor for those who have iPhones is the idea of Siri. Now, Siri doesn't actually exist. There is no little person inside the iPhone. And yet she's really useful.
Is she talking to you right now? Oh, okay.
No. I see the brain as being, I mean, we know what the brain is, that now the brain is more rightly thought of as being more like an internet than like a computer. When I did when I went all the way back, when I did my psychology degree, we were more or less taught, the brain is like a computer, every brain cell is like a transistor. These days, the thinking is much more like every brain cell is like a little computer, which means our entire brains are much more like an internet of 89 billion computers all networked together. So there is this phenomenal capacity for information processing. Now, if we propose to a completely naive client, if we propose to them that there is some way of accessing this intelligence and that intelligence can speak to us with a voice, then that intelligence absolutely on the fly will create a voice that we can communicate with. And that is what people are usually talking to when they talk about talking to the subconscious mind. Now, one of the reasons that I don't really like the term subconscious is I think that intelligence is more conscious than we are. And yet we've all heard, and we all probably use that example of highway hypnosis, that when we're driving along the road, who's actually driving the damn car? And it's true, the automatic intelligence, that some phenomenal intelligence of our entire neurology is beautifully operating our bodies. It's beautifully responding to road conditions, traffic conditions. It's doing all of that. It's conscious while we're unconscious, while we're, singing along to whatever songs on the radio, or fretting about being late for whatever appointment we might be going to, or, complaining bitterly about how long it's taking them to repair the road, or all of that stuff. While we're doing that, our intelligence is responding and adapting beautifully to the external environment and our internal environments. It's doing all of that. So, yeah, I see the brain as possessing this phenomenal capacity for intelligence, and almost all of that happens automatically. So I know that we're only talking about metaphors, and I'm not saying that the metaphor of the subconscious mind is poorer quality or less useful, but for me, I stumble on those words. So for me, I talk about, it's the automatic part of who you are. I haven't got a nice, neat little two-word phrase yet that will encapsulate that. But, subconscious mind, to me, does that intelligence a profound disservice.
It's so interesting how great that your timing is of mentioning this, because I was just creating a sign-up page for a protocol I'm getting ready to do that's based on parts work. And I was writing, and I put that unconscious part of you, and I thought that doesn't really make sense. And so you are creating so much clarity in my head and giving me a model that's so much more useful and resonates more. So is this intelligence synonymous? Is this the part that you are referring to when you talk about the automatic part of who you are? It's that intelligence?
Yeah. There's a science fiction book that I really love, which has nothing to do with what we're talking about, except kind of maybe everything to do with it. It's by a writer called Philip K. Dick, who, among other things, wrote the book that Blade Runner is based on. He was a phenomenal guy. The author himself was absolutely interesting. He had this amazing experience when he answered the door one day wanting some pain medication, which was being delivered to him. And the woman came to the door and she was wearing one of those little Christian fish medallions around her neck. And in the moment that he saw that medallion, something profound happened inside the mind of Philip K. Dick, and he underwent a transformational experience where he started being able to speak ancient Greek. He was able to diagnose a potentially life-threatening birth defect in his son. He suddenly knew that he had to get his son to the doctor, and the doctor found that, yes, he did have this potentially incarcerating inguinal hernia that needed surgery. All kinds of phenomenal things happened, which was maybe him being opened up to that vast, intelligent part of who he was. But Philip Dick wrote this book about that experience called VALIS, V-A-L-I-S. And VALIS is an acronym, and it's in the book it means something completely different, or not. But VALIS stands for the Vast Active Living Intelligent System. And to me, that's what we're dealing with. The unconscious mind. Sometimes I won't use the word VALIS because that would jar people out of the process, but I will talk about, the vast active living intelligent system you are. And to me, that's the playground. That's where we are. We're dealing with this phenomenal capacity to change and to grow. There's a saying, I won't get it word perfect, but I'll try to get it perfect enough so that you can look up the actual saying. It's something along the lines of, if our brains were so simple that we could understand them, we would be so simple that we couldn't. And our brains, anyone who thinks that they are ever going to understand neuroscience, not in this lifetime, honey, just no. It is just so phenomenal. I understand enough to know that I will never fully understand. I'm only paddling in the shallows. But when you think about what's involved in the brain, 89 billion neurons, every single neuron on average connected directly to 7,000 others. It's just mind-boggling, the fact that the brains can make new connections at the rate of 1 million every second, whether you're awake, whether you're asleep, whether you're even in a coma. The potentiality in that, it's more than we can possibly conceive of. So the only attitude that I feel that I can absolutely take to that mystery is humility and awe and reverence. And every client who walks through the door carries that potentiality inside them. And it's that I'm in service of. It's that I work with.
I brought you here for my audience, and I'm getting so much. I can feel my own confidence and, like, for lack of a better word, self-esteem growing, just thinking of this paradigm, of this way of thinking about ourselves without that word unconscious. And you're like, I can feel my own paradigm shifting as you're speaking.
Yay.
Will you talk to me about how the idea of parts work fits into this idea, this paradigm, this metaphor?
Okay, well, we're going to have to go to Switzerland.
Okay, I'm game.
In Lucerne or Lausanne, as they, I believe, call it, there are some very, 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 very smart people. I'm sure they all have PhDs, multiple PhDs, and they are working on this thing called the Blue Brain Project. I think I've remembered it correctly. And what they are attempting to do is to identify the way that neural networks hang together. Now, what's really fascinating and compelling to me, if we just come back to those ideas that every neuron we have connects to intimately, directly connects to 7,000 others, the fascinating finding that these folks in Switzerland have come up with is that the neurons tend to work together in little subgroups. They form these sort of tightly knit work groups. And the maximum population size for one of those work groups isn't 7,000, it's 12. Any more than 12 and the group falls apart. It can't hold together, it doesn't cohere at all. So they call these things cliques or cliques, like CLIQUE.
Okay.
So we have all these cliques inside our brain, every neuron. Now, if every neuron can connect to 7,000 others, but it can only actually be in a work group with 12 at the most, then somehow that means that every neuron must be participating in a number of different cliques all at the same time. So how can these cliques hold together? It can't be a structural thing, because if everything connects to 7,000 others, then that's just not going to work. So the only thing that can possibly explain these groups holding together is the way they communicate with each other. So there are two things about neurons that make them particularly suited to the task. One of them is their ability to form connections. And the other is the fact that of all the cells, they're able to generate electrical inputs, they're able to process electrical inputs, they're able to transmit them. So my idea is that you have these little bunches of cells that are passing a little electrical charge around, and maybe there's only 10 or 12 cells in one of these groups. Maybe we need more than one of these groups. Maybe you get nested hierarchies of these cliques or cliques. We get these subsystems where there might be a little tangle, and maybe there's 1,000 neurons all involved in doing something. And yet the functional unit is just maybe only a dozen of them. If every one of these is a group that has an intention, which is carrying out a specific function, then every one of those groups is potentially a part. So when we talk about parts therapy, how many parts can we have? Oh boy, now we have to go to Italy. I have a friend who is a certified math genius. I am a certified math idiot. But I asked her, how many cliques could there possibly be in the human brain? And she needed a little information. I said, okay, here are our assumptions. 89 billion, let's assume 89 billion brain cells. Let's assume that every clique has 12 members. Now, we don't know that they do. They might only have 2. It might be that it's a bell curve and the most common one is 7. Who knows? But let's assume that they all have 12. And let's assume that every neuron can connect to 7,000 others. How many cliques could there be? Well, she didn't reply to me for a while, and I kind of got a bit grumpy with her, and I said, what's the answer? And she got very grumpy back with me, and she said, I don't think you've got any idea how big this number is. And I said, oh, I know it's a big number. And she says, I don't think you know how big this number is. And she sent me this formula, which was, it may as well have been Sumerian or hieroglyphics. It was all calculus and had all kinds of bits and pieces. But I saw numbers in there. I saw parts of the formula that made sense to me. One of the parts was the factorial sign. Now, the factorial sign looks like an exclamation mark. And a factorial, very simply, means when you have the factorial of a number, it's that number times every other number possibly lower than that. Now, to give you an example, the factorial of 3 would be 3 times 2 times 1. So that's 6. The factorial of 4 will be 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. So that's 24. Every time you go up, the number gets massively bigger. One of the numbers that we're dealing with in the answer to this question is 89 billion factorial. She said, finally, she said to me, if you want to know how big this number is, we will need to rent time on a supercomputer. I can't even tell you how much time we would need to rent on the supercomputer. Finally, to get me off her back, she said, if it helps, I can tell you with 100% confidence, the number of clicks in the human brain is more than the number of stars in the known universe. Now, that's not more than the number of stars in the night sky, because a lot of those things we look at that we think of as stars are actually galaxies. This is more than the number of stars in the known universe. Wow. So that's potentially how many parts we're dealing with. I know.
Incredible.
It's just, it puts me on my backside every time. It just knocks me down. That is the phenomenal capability that all of our clients have, and who we have.
Do you have a favorite story, a favorite transformation story? Maybe someone that came in and you thought, I don't know if I can help this person. And
I do. Yeah. The one that comes immediately to mind was a little girl. She's died now. She had a brain tumor. She was in severe pain following the radiotherapy that she had. And her parents came to see me to see, was there anything that I could do to help this little girl? Now, Laurie, I don't know what came over me. I truly don't, because this is not how I have ever conducted myself before or afterwards. This was just something working through me, I guess. I don't know. But I saw this little girl. Now, I'd heard a few stories about her because my wife had seen her and had described what kind of a girl she was. So when she came to see me, I looked at her, got down to her level. I said, I hear you've got a really amazing imagination. And she just, very, very proud. She was just absolutely the most delightful, delightful little presence. And I said, can you show me whereabouts the pain is? And she pointed to this spot deep in her sinuses. That's where it was really hurting. And all I did was I reached out and I touched her on that spot. I said, could you imagine that my finger is like a sort of like a magic vacuum cleaner? And she went, yeah, like, that's easy. Why don't you get me to imagine something? That was very easy for her to do. I said, could you imagine that I can just start sucking all of the pain out of there? I said, what I want you to do is just imagine me doing that and let me know when the pain has dropped down to half the level that it is right now. And so she looked at me very intently, and I just kept my finger there, and then her eyes suddenly went really wide. And she said, it's all gone. And that, I don't know, she just looked absolutely delighted. I don't know whose jaw dropped more, mine or her mum or dad's. But all of us were just, and this was, they had only just stepped inside the door. I hadn't done any intake. I'd introduced myself, and it was just one of these magical moments. I don't know that we need to build a protocol around it, the magic vacuum cleaner pain protocol. It was just something that came out of the moment. It was something where the automatic part of me just recognized that, you know, okay, let's forget all about this hypnotherapy nonsense. Let's just use him and let's just get this thing done. It was lovely to be an instrument of that process. I don't feel that it came from me. I feel like it came through me, but it was phenomenal. Yeah.
I love that. Will you talk to me a little bit about how you generated your hypnosis business, how you bring in clients, how you make yourself more visible? Just because I know that's such a common thing that people wonder about in this industry.
Yeah, I am not the world's best business person. I can always use more clients. Most of my clients now come through word of mouth, or people look up on Google and see the testimonials, see the reviews that I have. I absolutely do recommend networking groups. If you have a networking group like BNI is a really good investment, just in terms of it gives you practice week after week of getting up and honing your pitch, getting really clear on how to do, you know, and how to say in 60 seconds what it is that you can do. It's also a great generally speaking, inside of a group, there will be a number of people in that group who will seek out your services and they will refer on to other people. Word of mouth is the absolute best way to get clients. I am just now starting to get the confidence to create videos and to start putting them online. I'm in the practice group that we set up as part of your 3-day challenge, and I have set myself a challenge of doing a video a day for 366 days. I've decided I'm going to do it a year and a day, and I guess I'm up to about day 15 or 16 by now. Very, very simple, short videos. It's all about getting confident about the ability to just talk to that scary little camera and just say what's real. So I would say, though I'm not an expert, that will make a difference. Certainly, I've only actually put one of all the videos that I've done. I've managed to create one video that I thought, I'm going to share this on my actual page. I did that and got a client book within half an hour of me posting that video. So I think getting comfortable with video is absolutely a powerful thing to do. Another thing that I would recommend is just use this whenever you can. Once I was shopping and I saw a man shuffling along in a lot of pain with a walking frame. And I said, look, forgive me if I'm intruding and tell me to go away if you want to, but it looks to me like you're in a lot of pain, and I can help with that pain. And long story short, he ended up sitting down on it was kind of like, I'm guessing like a Walmart or a Costco for your American people. It was a big retail thing. So he's sitting on a a big wooden pallet on which are stacked a whole lot of 20-kilo sacks of dog biscuits. He's just sitting on that, and I'm just down squatting on my haunches, and I ran the arrow with him. You can do that kind of thing. You can just allow yourself, worst case scenario, you fall flat on your face, you never see that person again, no harm, no foul. But maybe, just maybe, you're able to access that phenomenal capacity for change that they have, and you can create amazing results. And certainly get business cards, hand them out. But get the word out there. Just let people know that you're good at what you do. And over time, people will find you. There are ways to speed the whole process up. You can, I'm not the best person to talk about that. The best person to talk about that, hands down, I think would be Jason Lynette. Mm-hmm. And his Work Smart Hypnosis podcast has been an invaluable resource for me. And his Work Smart Hypnosis, his paid membership group is phenomenal. There is so much content in there that I have barely only scratched the surface of. But for anyone doing this stuff, there are really 3 parts of being a successful hypnotherapist that you need to attend to. One is you absolutely need to attend to business skills. You need to get those. If you can't be successful in business, then you can't help people. The second thing is that you absolutely need a skill set that you can rely on. And so you need to master 1 or 2 approaches that, will empower you to help people create change. And then the third thing that you need to do is you need to do the self-work. You need to address the fears that you might have, all the doubts that you have about yourself as a therapist. You're not special. You're not the only one who's had those doubts. I mean, you are special, but you're not the only one who's had those doubts. And absolutely, those doubts are being generated by the automatic part of who you are. And so they can be changed. Find somebody that you feel comfortable and confident with, and just put your hand up and say, I'm struggling with a lot of self-doubt. Can you help with that? If you don't know anybody, pick me. I work with people over Zoom. Laurie works with people over Zoom. Lots of us work with people over Zoom. Just reach out to somebody and say, can you help me with this issue? Get that stuff out of the way, because that self-doubt is really, it's self-indulgent. It is getting in the way of you being of service to a suffering planet.
And I want to clarify, just because so many people, one of the reasons people's imposter monster gives them to wait is that they haven't arrived yet. So when you say self-work, do the work on yourself. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not saying that a person needs to have arrived and they need to have all their problems fixed before they start, correct?
Oh, God, no, I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever arrive, Laurie. Right. I don't know if I will ever arrive. But you don't have to be perfect. You do have to deal with the stuff that gets in the way. So if there is stuff that's in the way of you being effective, then work on that. But don't think you're not good enough to help clients, because it's not about you anyway. It's about them. They have the capacity. If you're having blocks about your ability to help them find their capacity, then, don't stop seeing people, and get some work to help yourself. Get some mentoring, practice, set up a meetup group with other people that you've trained with, practice with each other. It's fine. You don't need to be perfect, because you already are.
Absolutely. All right, Derry and I just took a quick intermission to grab some water. And Derry, if we were to get back to the idea of working with clients and doing this change work, can you talk to me about the role of feelings and emotions inside that process?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
It's been said that all of our clients come to us because they are having issues with feeling. They're feeling usually the three primary feelings that they're either feeling purely or in combination: anger, fear, or grief. And those things can kind of interact. We can get different blends of those feelings. The way in which something like the arrow, or indeed any of our really powerful change processes work, is by, well, this is my theory, it's by overwhelming those little cliques which are currently embodying the, if we can call it, the problem state or the expression of the person's problem. That particular problem always, in my experience, always carries inside of it an emotional energy. And that energy may be fear, maybe sadness, maybe guilt, maybe whatever, but there is usually a profound feeling which is embodied in that particular part of the person's experience. Now, I think that what we do when we work successfully is we are somehow connecting the part of the person. Now, you might call this a resource state, you might call it whatever you like, but there is a part of the person which carries or can carry an energy which is completely incompatible with the energy of the problem state. Now, inside of the arrow process, as it was taught to me, Freddie talks about the feeling of unconditional love. And certainly that is one of the most powerful energies that someone can experience. I believe it's more powerful than any of the others. Now, inside of the arrow, what we can do is get somebody in contact with that energy. And that's quite simple. We can just say, allow the automatic part of you to give you something that will feel like a memory. And inside of that memory, you can be feeling a powerful feeling of joy, of love. And then we wait and we calibrate. When we can see that the person is starting to respond to that, then inside of the arrow process, we just simply use the metaphor of floating upwards, floating out of the body, as a way of encouraging the automatic part of them to increase the power of that positive emotion. When we get that positive emotion absolutely powerfully expressed and inside of the feeling of unconditional love, it can be almost like a blissful, euphoric, elated experience. When somebody is inside of that, then, because our brains do make these phenomenal connections very, very quickly as imagining a pink hedgehog wearing a bowler hat, we can get the brain to make a connection between that powerful, emotional, positive state. We can just link that powerfully to the feeling which is powering their particular problem. When we get the right feeling, when we identify that feeling accurately, and that's where our, testing comes in, on a scale from 0 to 10, how powerful is that feeling? When we've got the right feeling and we are able to connect that feeling into this moment where they are experiencing that powerful, unconditional love, it's not a fair fight. The unconditional love will win out every single time. The two things connect together. That little bunch of cliques or cliques, which is running the fear or running the anger, every time it tries to complete that circuit, it's got these new connections that join it up to this other network, which is producing, vast amounts of unconditional love. It soon realizes that it's no longer able to fulfill its function and it switches off. And that's how I think we get these phenomenal, rapid change process is happening. I believe it's an electrical process. I believe it's a process of just switching off those clicks or cliques that are currently keeping the, which are currently keeping the problem state active. Now, those things aren't there because we have part of us hates who we are and wants us to be miserable. Those negative, if we can call them negative states, are only there because at some point in our lives, through whatever challenges we've faced, at some point in our lives, those feelings have been a powerful part of our emotional experience in those moments. And the automatic part of who we are is always looking to enrich its own understanding of what's going on in the world. And so it just absolutely makes a perfect record. It creates a perfect record of those powerful emotions. And then because it's an automatic thing, it just runs those things automatically over and over again. They're not necessary. When they're not necessary, they can be switched off. So that, in a nutshell, I think that's what the change process is. Now, it's been put quite beautifully in terms of the meta pattern of change, about associate them into the problem state, dissociate them from the problem state, associate them into the resource state, and then associate the resource state into the problem state. That's very succinct, but unless you fully understand how that applies, it can be difficult to see how to use that understanding powerfully inside of your process. But I think that pattern, which does come from John Overderf, that pattern does absolutely underlie all the hypnotic changes that people are able to create for themselves.
When you bring people into the feeling and you really tune into that feeling, do you have them tune into their body and see what the felt sense is? Or do you have them describe the feeling in some other way?
Yeah, all of that. All of that. When someone says, you know, I want to stop smoking, for example. Okay, what's it like for you when you need a cigarette? Tell me about the times when you really crave to have a cigarette. What does it feel like? You know, whereabouts in your body do you feel that? Oh, I will be all the time looking for how they are responding more than what they're actually saying. But I am listening to what they're saying. I'm listening for those words that indicate that, yeah, they're talking about powerful feeling states. Sometimes you've got to be a little bit sneaky, a little bit, well, no, not sneaky, that's the wrong word. It's important to not necessarily take people at their word. It's always good to inquire a little deeper. And I can tell you a really wonderful client story around this process of inquiry. I'm not always 100% on top of my game, but this particular day I was. I had a woman come to see me and she said, I've got an anger problem. You know, I need help with this anger. I'm angry all the time. And yet she wasn't angry with me. And she didn't seem to me to be angry. And so I asked, you know, when you say you're angry all the time, what do you mean? She says, well, I'm always yelling at my kids. I went, okay. Do you yell at anyone else? Like, you know, do you yell at people in stores or, you know, tradespeople? Do you yell at people in the street? And no, she only ever yelled at her kids. So I thought, okay, this isn't somebody with a generalized anger problem who is sort of, you know, waving their fist at the world. Now, in my intake process, I already knew some of this woman's backstory. She had told me that when she was 4 years old, her dad went out. He said, I'm just off to the shops. I don't know what for. We'll make something up here. I'm just going to the store to buy some bread. She never saw him again. Now, he didn't die, presumably he had his suitcase packed in the trunk of the car and he had his girlfriend waiting on the corner of the street. And he just took off and left, and she never saw him again. Now, what can a 4-year-old girl do with that? She can come to one of two conclusions. Either one, conclusion one, I live in a world where terrifying things happen at random. Or conclusion two, I must be a really terrible person for this to have happened to me. Clearly, option two is the safer answer. It gives her a sense of power. So she needed to have this idea that she was a terrible person. Now, when you're a mum of 2 kids, what's the most efficient way of proving you're a terrible person, of meeting that deep need? Yell at your children. So we did nothing in that session about working with anger. What we focused on was the grief that she was still carrying over the loss of her dad when she was 4. So yes, sometimes you need to look beyond the initial appearances, and while you can respect what people are saying, be aware that the person who's saying that's the conscious 7 bits of information at once, tiny little part of the vast active living intelligence system that they are. She was telling me one thing with her conscious, with her words. Her entire body was telling me something entirely different, picking up on that body language, the tonality, the all those other things that we might train ourselves to calibrate, many of which can't even be formulated, let alone articulated, put into words that you could learn. But we know them because we feel them, because it's partly what we're designed to do anyway. Listening to that wisdom can often take us to the right part. And when we find the right place to apply our change work, that's when clients can create absolute miracles.
I love that you keep coming back to that, that clients can create their miracles. And you had said earlier that the results of the client's creation, and I wrote down, magic is embodied in the client's neurology. And I think when we keep reminding ourselves of that, it's like you said, it takes that pressure off, and we're just simply the guides. Derry,
yeah, what a relief. What a relief.
Yes.
It's like, that's not all on me.
Yes, it really is. Yeah. Do you ever have a client who maybe the idea of love is almost a loaded word for them, and when you talk about unconditional love, they resist the idea of letting that be their superpower that just obliterates those other negative states?
Oh, yeah. This one person, again, it was somebody I was working with at the hospital, and she had some abdominal pain. And one of the questions that I ask most of my clients is, do you have any children? I mean, I don't ask them if they're children, of course, but, if somebody is in later life, I say, do you have any children? And, most people have children. And I assumed, I no longer make this assumption, but I assumed that if you had children, then you know something of unconditional love. This woman had children. She said, I don't know what you're talking about. I had them. I don't love them. I've never loved them. I never will love them. I just absolutely, we have this wonderful word in this part of the world, gobsmacked. A gob is a word meaning a mouth, and a smack is like a punch in the mouth. She just gobsmacked me with this idea that she was a mum who had 4 kids and had no idea what unconditional love was. Now, she would have been a fantastic person to work with and explore what her world looked like, but alas, I never saw her again. But yeah, I do have clients, and unconditional love isn't something that they can necessarily relate to. Sometimes people have a particular feeling for pets. Sometimes people have a feeling for caring. you can actually just do it with fun. Any powerful, positive feeling. Now, there is a whole strand of hypnosis that works entirely using sexual energy. Now, I don't do that, but in terms of primary affect theory, sexual arousal is one of the powerful ones that you can use. But the positive ones that you can use: curiosity, sexual arousal, unconditional love, and play. Those are the 4 powerful positive affects. I think a lot of the patterns and protocols and things that we use inside of hypnosis, I honestly think it's curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Curiosity, when we were able to take our clients through suggestion, we're able to take them through a series of experiences they've never had before. Even something as simple as going through a doorway and going down some steps, that arouses that feeling of curiosity inside people. Unconditional love will beat our curiosity every time. But if you don't have unconditional love inside of a person to draw on, then absolutely that feeling of joy, the feeling of pleasure, any powerful, positive emotional state. I have yet to meet anyone who hasn't been able to access at least some part of who they are where there is a powerful, positive emotion. And normally what I say to people is, once I feel that I have their attention and that we are indeed engaged in a hypnotic process, I'll say, just close your eyes and imagine that the automatic part of you can give you something that will feel like a memory. It doesn't matter whether it ever happened or not. It might be a composite. It might be the weather from this day and the people from that day wearing the clothes from another day. It doesn't matter. But the automatic part of you can give you something that will feel like a memory. And all that matters about this experience is that it be a moment where you feel good. So perhaps there's laughter. Perhaps you can see smiles. Perhaps you can feel yourself smiling inside of that moment. And then I just leave it for that person's automatic part to paint in the picture for me. I just kind of create some boundary conditions. I create a sense, an expectation, if you like, of what might be possible. And then I let the client fill that in.
I hope I'm not the only one taking notes. You are giving some of the most beautiful language patterns. I wrote down, close your eyes and imagine that the automatic part of you can give you something that feels like a memory. And all that matters is that it's a moment that will feel good. So, and then you put some terms in there that just empower the client to know you're doing it right. So often people think there's a certain way they're supposed to experience this stuff. And this goes back to what you said at the very beginning. If you'll just give it your best effort, just be willing to play along, you are doing it right. Derry, the biggest reason I invited you on this show is has an amazing video you made in my 3-day video challenge recently that just impacted me so much. And I shared it with people with your permission. And it really segues into what we're talking about with unconditional love being such a powerful way to break up those cliques and to create new behaviors. Will you share with us the writing activity that you shared on that video about helping people step into a place of self-love?
Oh, yeah. I tracked down the source of this as well. It was a gentleman, I believe he has since left the church, but he was a Catholic priest by the name of Clive Litton, Littin. And he put out this little guidebook on how to use affirmations, and it talked about laundering affirmations. And laundering affirmations is a wonderful process for accessing those parts of ourselves which may be holding us back, which may be creating that sense of maybe being an imposter or maybe being not good enough or not worthy enough. And it's a really simple yet absolutely profound and elegant process. And all it requires is that you take some time, and you need 2 writing implements. Well, you don't actually need them. You can just do it with 1, but it works best with 2. maybe a black pen and a blue pen, or a red crayon and a green crayon. It doesn't really matter. And you come up with some sort of affirmation that you might want to apply to yourself. I am an amazing hypnotist. Could be as simple as that. Or I have a phenomenal skill set to help my clients. Whatever. Let's go with the first one. I'm an amazing hypnotist. So you get out your piece of paper and you pick up one pen and you write down, I am an amazing hypnotist. And then you listen for that critical response. And the critical response might go, yeah, well, what about that client that didn't get a result? So, aha. And you get out your other pen, and in the other color you write down, yeah, but what about that client that didn't get the result? And then you say it again, I am an amazing hypnotist. Now, there is one rule and one rule only for the critical response. It's not allowed to repeat itself exactly. So it has to come up with a different response each time. Now, the critical part of who we are, let's pretend that it is an actual person with feelings just for a moment. I don't know if it is or it isn't. The critical part of who we are likes a challenge. It likes being paid attention to. It's like, oh, you're listening to me. You want me to show you how smart I am, how clever I am. It's kind of like that. And so it will go, oh, okay, you want a different response. I'll give you a different response. You are completely useless. How do you like them apples? So you write down, you are completely useless. How do you like them apples? Boom. I'm an amazing hypnotist. Like hell you are. I'm an amazing hypnotist. In a pig's ear you are. I'm an amazing hypnotist. No, you're not. I'm an amazing hypnotist. No, you're not. No, you're not allowed to say no, you're not twice. Oh, okay. You absolutely are not. Now, it might take you a page, it might take you a couple of pages. Eventually, you'll get to a place where the automatic part of who you are has that automatic critical part of who you are has exhausted its repertoire. It cannot come up with a new thing to say to you. And at that point, it kind of gives up. It just goes, oh, all right, I'm an amazing hypnotist. Yeah, all right, you are. I'm an amazing hypnotist. Absolutely you are. When you get to a place where that internal critical voice is now 100% supporting your affirmation, then the affirmation can be considered to be laundered. It is now ready to wear. So you can now say that to yourself in front of the mirror, holding a candle, or at sunset, or under the stars, or in your bedroom closet, or wherever you want to say it. You can think it to yourself while you're working with your clients. It's ready for use because it will no longer be automatically counted by that critical voice inside, which isn't out to get you. It's only always just, I believe, just testing your commitment.
Right.
You make a statement about who you are, and it's doing the equivalent of coming around and kicking the tires. It's making, do you really believe that? Let's see if you can stand up to a bit of criticism. When you keep going, eventually that criticism goes, okay, you're sincere about this. Yeah, all right, we'll support that. I don't know, that's possibly reading a whole lot more into it than is going on, but that's sort of how I think of the process. Really simple, just write out an affirmation which has to be in the present tense. Ideally, and my one didn't in this case, but ideally it should have your name in there. I, Derry, am an amazing hypnotherapist. No, you're not. Yeah. In the present tense, in a positive sense. So it shouldn't be, I'm not a bad hypnotist. It should be, I am a good one. And why settle for good when you can have amazing? So come up with something, come up with a nice short affirmation of your own quality, and then launder it. And like actual laundry, sometimes you need to keep laundering things. They get dirty after a while. Sometimes you have to just run that affirmation again, have a listen. Is there a negative, critical thing? Great. Just do it again. It probably won't take as long, because the first time you launder it, you're laundering a whole lifetime. Afterwards, when you're laundering it, you may be only laundering the kind of dirt that you've picked up in the last couple of weeks. So there it is. Hope I explained that well.
Thank you. Very well. I love what you said about once you've laundered it, it's ready to wear. And I think, so often the affirmations that we're saying to ourselves, affirmations work. If you're saying, I'm a terrible hypnotist, I'm afraid, you're wearing that affirmation. I'm not sure if affirmation is the right word, but yeah. When we put them on and we try them on and we let ourselves keep reaffirming it, our unconscious, that automatic part of us really begins to take that on and make that belief automatic. So many of our negative beliefs are just things we've picked up from other people. We're wearing other people's dirty laundry. So
yeah. And of course, when we're constructing these affirmations, I think it's valuable to make ones that carry that powerful, positive feeling inside of them. If they are simply dry and bloodless and don't really engage those positive states, whether it is could be a sexy feeling, could be a playful feeling, could be a feeling of curiosity, it could be a feeling of absolute unconditional love for ourselves. When we can imbue the affirmation, if we've got words that inspire that feeling inside of us, they are so much more powerful.
This has been so amazing, Derry. Is there anything we haven't touched on that's important for people to understand before we say goodbye?
So much more. We could easily do another one of these in a year's time, and I'm sure
should.
Yeah. One thing I'd just like to say, I don't have any product out yet. I am currently working on 2 books. I have the titles. One of them is called Remodeling Hypnosis. The other book is called The Possibilities Engine. And I'm working on those now, and I've re-engaged my business partner to crack the whip to make sure that I produce the output. So I do firmly expect that they will both be out next year. In the meantime, if anyone wants to get in contact with me, if anybody wants to work with me online, either for mentoring or they just want to pick my brain or whatever, I'm absolutely available to do that. My fee structure is whatever you charge for your clients for your time, I'd like to charge you that for my time. So for beginning practitioners who are maybe only charging $50 for an hour, that's fine. I'll work with you for $50. I just want to help the biggest number of people that I can. And there is so much suffering in the world, which is needless. And people are in so much need of empowerment that if I can empower people to empower others, then that makes my mission so much easier.
This is amazing. And I just want to tell everyone who's listening, I 100% recommend going to see Derry. He has such a powerful presence. He and I have only connected virtually like this. And Derry, I would just want to say to you personally, I'm so grateful that you are making video. You have given me so much with the videos that you have been making, and I am so excited that you're putting these out. I can't wait till you're putting them out to the whole world and they just are going viral. That one video you made is what brought us here today. And who knows, maybe when my podcast goes viral, you'll have even more people getting their hands on this life-changing message. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, for your true compassion and humility. I'm so grateful to you, and I'm grateful to everyone who's listening. Have an amazing day, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Laurie. I've absolutely enjoyed connecting with you, and keep doing what you do. You're an inspiration to me and to so many others.
Thank you, Derry. I'm so grateful you've listened all the way to the end. What is one tiny action step you'll take now based on an aha moment you got during the podcast. Maybe that life-changing action step is to come accept the gift I have for you at theimpostermonster.com. Head there right now to get your powerful hypnosis audio, The Answer Room. That lets you make important decisions and get crystal clear about your next step forward on this path of purpose in your one great and precious life.